Oh, something going on there. I'm back and I'm live. It is 7:40. I'm a little bit late, but we just got back from Southern California and went down for a very cool soccer tournament for my son. And got to spend some time down there, spend some time on the beach. Got to see a good friend of mine who I hadn't seen in a while, Harold. So shout out to Harold. I've known him since I was 4. We met each other essentially by getting in a fight by the Funhouse over at Markham. And for those of you wondering, I got second place, but I figured I finished on the podium. But ever since then, we've been friends. So it turned out it worked out well. We got to go out in the ocean. Owen got to swim with his buddies, and it was all just good stuff. And I didn't do anything while I was there. I brought my computer and stuff to do live feeds, but I didn't do it. I just did that stuff, so which was a much better choice. But I'm back, and we've got lots of stuff to talk about. We've got lots of cool stuff coming up. I've got a bunch of testing that I already did. You guys will start seeing all of those videos now kind of flood in because now it's time to get back to work, starting with this one. So the thumbnail that I posted was a very interesting one. It was actually one that we spotted while we were walking by our hotel. I saw the guy over working on this thing, and I'm like, yeah, looks like that's a Mini Cooper. So it was a supercharged Mini Cooper. I thought, oh, that right away. That's fairly cool. It was one for sale, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And that he was hooking up a tow hitch to another vehicle that didn't appear to have any sort of tow hitch assembly welded to it. It didn't have all the brackets and everything that needed. I'm like, well, this will be cool. This will be interesting. I'll be interested to see when we go back and forth about what's actually going on here. Like, how is he going to do this? And as you can see from the photo, he used what he had in terms of zip ties and duct tape and mostly the ratchet straps and stuff, and maybe figures, hey, this is going to be okay. And quite honestly, it would probably work it'll certainly work for 10 feet, but will it work for 20 or 50 or 100 or a mile or 2 miles? It's not going to work out on the freeway very well. Certainly not if he has to make any sort of evasive maneuvers. So I don't think it's going to hold very well personally. But and I don't know and I'm assuming that that's what this guy was doing. Maybe he was just moving it from one parking spot that he had with both cars to another one. So maybe he didn't have to move it very far. I don't know what the story was. I didn't go ask the guy, but I just thought it was cool that he was like, he had his trunk open and he had a few tools and stuff, and he just had the stuff that he had, and he was going to make it work, regardless of the sketchiness of the system. But he did make it work, and I didn't see him drive away, and like I said, didn't talk to him and figure out, hey, how far do you have to go? Like, what exactly you're trying to get done? It would have been interesting to have all that detailed information. But I just thought you guys would like the photo of the assembly itself, which is definitely first rate. So the question then becomes, have you guys done this kind of stuff? I mean, or we know that you have. If you're watching this channel, we definitely know that you have. So what kinds of things, what things like this have you done? You see, when I put these engines on the dyno, whenever I wire up the throttle linkage, it's always a piece of baling wire, or sometimes it's the stainless wire too. Sometimes it's that, but a lot of times it's just baling wire. It's so much easier than having to. A lot of times, especially if I'm doing intake manifolds, or I'm testing 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 intake manifolds, a lot of times they require different kinds of throttle assemblies. It's definitely going to be different distances. Sometimes the angle of attack for the throttle linkage, all that stuff can be different. So, having to use a piece of wire like that provides a lot of flexibility for mounting the pole section, which is usually just a Morse cable on a bracket, the typical kind of 2-pronged with a little slider hook over the top of it. It's that the Morse cable's got a slot, slides in, and and then you mount that piece to something solid, usually a piece of metal, a cylinder head, intake manifold, whatever. And then in the dyno, when you grab the handle and you move it forward or backward, you're moving that Morse cable, and that's what activates the throttle. So all you got to do then is hook the Morse cable up to the throttle linkage somehow. A lot of times, like on a carbureted deal, we'll have the little a rod end that slips over the throttle ball. That works pretty good. And that way I like it, because you can, with the throttle linkage, you can move the throttle, you can force it closed also. So you can move it you know, in both directions with an even amount of force, which is a lot of times good. With the throttle, the way that I do it normally with the piece of wire, it's not the same thing. You're obviously relying on the throttle spring. Any application that I put that on obviously has a throttle spring. Sometimes in some applications we hook a second throttle return spring to it if it needs it, if that's part of it. But it works very well. So that there's that, and I've even done double throttle linkages where we route them to. In this case, I used a clothes hanger roller and routed them both to either side of that and made a single pull down on the back side. You know, whatever you got to do, you have stuff that you have access to or you have at your disposal. Westech has a few things that for me to pick and choose from, or the ability for me to make some sort of rudimentary thing that is going to work. And for me, it only has to work for what I'm doing it for the dyno. It's not a permanent thing. It's not something that I'm going to TIG weld and polish and paint and anodize and detail and, you know, make like that so that it's ready for the SEMA show. This is just like a Super Richie project. All I got to do is get full throttle or whatever, make the valve cover fit or the power steering or stack washers to install blower crank pulleys, you know, whatever the thing is, if as long as it lasts long enough for me to get my data, that's really the thing that I care about. Anything beyond that really is just a bonus. And then a lot of these things, like I said, I would never like try to make them more than they are, or try to use them for longer, you know, have them last longer than we would never put them in a vehicle. Obviously, if we're doing that, we're doing it permanently. I definitely do it differently. Although some of the motors that have had, you know, ball hones and stuff, I would run those in cars, no problem at all. And given, like I said, in our discussions about these from the wrecking yard, if it was bad and I took it apart, whatever I do to it is only going to make it better. And so if it's better, better is better. Right? If it's 2% better or 20 or 50% better, whatever the better is, it's trending in the right direction. So a lot of those things, like the 4.8 that I just ran, that I did the videos on, when I ball honed one cylinder, and you know, as I told you what would happen, we got chastised by the people that have to make it perfect and applauded by the people that think, oh, that's the greatest thing in the world. And then in between there's a big space where, hey, look, you can do some of this and you can do some of this, and really lots of stuff here can work. This over here and spending all the money and having everything new, that's the best way. But does everybody have that kind of money and desire? Over here, spending no money, is that really the best way? Sometimes yes, sometimes that's just purely out of necessity. Okay, look, I have no budget at all, and yet I want to make this thing better. What can I do to make this thing better and spend zero money? There are those things. What can I do to make it perfect? There are things there. And then the big gap in between, there's all of those other things. You can do some of that stuff, maybe spend a little bit of money. Maybe when you put new ring gap in it and you put a new head gasket or put ARP head studs or something on it, maybe you do that and just that, or maybe you save the money and put stock head bolts on it and buy injectors, whatever, you know, whatever couple of piecemeal things that you're trying to do to make it better, rather than, and then go, hey, look, I'm not having a 5.3 that I buy where everything is brand new and have it make exactly the same power as the $300 5.3 that I buy out of the wrecking yard. Because if you use the same specs, the same piston, the same same compression, same head, same intake manifold, same camshaft stuff, they're really going to make the same power. All of the brand new guys can yell and scream about that all that they want, but I've tested lots and lots of those, and if you get a good one and it's running right, it makes what that one does. It's not to say that won't last longer now because it's fresh, and this one's already gone 300,000 miles. This one has yet to go that, so it has at least that, we would think. But in terms of power, really, really comparable, much closer than they would be farther apart. So that's, you know, there's something to be said for all of that stuff. There's all of it good. But I did get a lot of that. Oh, you should never listen to Richard. He doesn't know what he's talking about. You can't do that. Like, no, actually you can. Not only can you, but we just did, and it worked. And I'm not alone in this. I'm not the one guy saying, hey, guess what? You can do this. I'm a guy saying, look, I did this, and then thousands of other people chime in and go, yeah, I've done that, because that's what the industry is, and there's a lot of that going on. So it's very, very cool. I have lots of camshaft tests coming up. We've got the Truck Norris versus the low lift Truck Norris. We've got a couple of Elgin cams which people want, although I don't think either one of them are a sloppy stage 1 or a sloppy stage 3. I think that they're maybe some of them are closer to a sloppy stage 1. I need to actually look and see what those specs are. So I need to look at that. But I tested some smaller Elgin cams, and we're going to take a look at those. And I also ran the sloppy stage 2, so we have that to compare to a bunch of stuff. I have the hot rod cam. I have the red hot cam. Apparently hot was very popular when they started naming all these cams. So I have those cams. I've got a lot of stuff. So we've got a lot of good data to come up. The 4.8, we ran the stock cam. We got it running. We have that video is already up. And then now I'm going to do we did a cam upgrade on it. And then maybe that motor is going to go into Oliver's Nova, which would be cool. It'd be cool to see it. We've already seen it run. I've already seen it do a cam test. We already know it's working well. To have it go in a car and run around would just obviously would be awesome. So that would be kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to that. The guys at Holley said that they were interested in maybe doing something. So we might get some, motor mounts or whatever kinds of things that they might supply to stick that in a Nova, which would be awesome. Maybe an accessory drive or something that would, we only need to run, I think the only thing on the Nova that we need to run is the alternator and the water pump, and then that's basically it. And so there's no power steering. There's not going to be any air conditioning. There's none of that stuff. So it should be a fairly simple Fiat assembly. It has when I gave him the motor or gave him the car, there was a good radiator and stuff with it, although they have dedicated ones. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. And I would like to run it. The thing that I like about that is whether we put the 4.8 in it and then he runs it with the 3-speed Saginaw, which you could with the 4.8, because it's not going to be super powerful. I think it's plenty strong enough for that to drive around, although the shifting on it is just terrible. So he's leaning more towards doing a turbo 350 or the other option is if Holley were to step up and provide some kind of computer that would, like a Terminator X Max or whatever, that would control a transmission, then a 4L60 would be a possibility, or a 4L80 would be a possibility. If we eventually wanted to run boost on there or something, which, is always a possibility, especially cheap boost, which is good. Cheap boost and E85 and then a decent transmission, I think would be good. I'm excited about the fact that I would like to put, we had originally talked about the possibility of just putting like a turbo 350 in it and just call it good and just run it and see what happens. Because I would want to put a turbo 350 in it that has a very, stockish kind of converter in it. And then it also has like a 308 or a 307 gear set in it. So it'd be interesting to run it like that with the lack of torque that would be inherent in the 4.8, and then the lack of gearing, and then the lack of converter. So it would lack a lot of things. And then we could see what each one of those, what do we gain when we start changing those things? What happens now when we put a converter in it? And does it help? How much does it help? What happens now, we go from a 308 gear to a 410 gear or 373 or something, maybe something that's still drivable. But, how much does the gearing help? The car's fairly light because it's obviously all stripped out. So it's fairly light. But even still, gearing and a converter on a motor that's not known for its torque, if we're able to run at EFI, it would be better because the power curve is definitely better. And that's another comparison I'm going to show you is we ran the dual plane carbureted Performer RPM intake manifold and a 750 Holley versus the truck intake manifold on a 4.8. And so I looked back through my stuff and I don't know if maybe I have done that, but not with this camshaft in it. So, there's always the one little thing that makes it different and neat and new. And I was just excited that we did it on this motor because the motor was, pretty questionable, a little touch and go there for a long time. Didn't even know if it was going to run. It has sat for quite a while since the first day that I brought it home. And I did some stuff and we took it apart. We tried to run it on the dyno and it only had 5 or 6 decent holes that were, well, they were firing at least. Who knows how much power they were making, but we had to go through and fix a lot of stuff. And then I kind of stopped there. And then the last time I went back down there, got it back running again, because it's always better to have a motor that's complete. And that's one of my projects for this coming year, and even the rest of this year, is to get some of these motors from just pieces laying in the shop, well, not even in the shop, laying in the storage area, to complete motors that are running. So that's, and we're going to do the 2.2, and then I have a couple of others that I would like to get just running, even if they're just running, even if they're just all stock, whatever they are, as long as they're running, then I can do stuff with them on the dyno, and that will be good. So I'm excited also about the L28. When I go down and work the next time on the 2.2, I'm going to try to get the bell housing adapter done for the L28 also. So that will be good. So let's see what you guys, back half the Nova. Let's see what you guys have going on. And so we've got to get a poll going. We're going to call this thing, I don't know, I don't really know how heavy it is, but we're going to say, I'm going to try to give you as much information as possible. Oh, nailed it. Okay, will a 3,000-pound, 4.8-liter Nova with a turbo 350 stock converter 308 gears, will it run a sub 15 quarter mile? So, like, will it run a 14.99 or better? So let's see what people have to say. I've seen a K2500 Chevy with a frame chopped off behind the cab and tandem axle trailer without a tongue welded to the back of the truck. You use the front axles to pull it around. Nice. I like that. When I was 17, I put a 351 Windsor and a 6-cylinder 65 Mustang. Did not have the proper throttle linkage, so I ran a coat hanger from the carb through the firewall to the dash and used a hand throttle. Hey, that works, man. So, Matt, you use 4 400-pound rated Harbor Freight ratchet straps to pull a 10,000-pound paint booth heater out of the building to a flatbed truck with a 97 Tacoma. Nice. Tim's in the house. One time I saw a Crown Vic towing a trailer with an F-250 crew cab on it. The Crown Vic was dragging the roof upper, yeah. It's like I do going down the interstate with a 16-foot tandem axle trailer without a hitch at all. He just had the tongue of the trailer ratchet strapped into the trunk somehow. It's pretty sketchy. I like the people that try to tow vehicles that are bigger and heavier than the vehicle that they're towing it with. And when the tail starts wagging the dog, you're like, oh yeah, you're just about in a world of hurt here. All you're missing is an overly choppy chop cam. The cam that's in the 4.8 right now is that Brian Tooley Racing Truck Norris low lift cam, because we ran it with the stock springs on it, the stock 706 head springs, the truck stuff, which are the smallest springs that GM offers, and they work just fine. And it revved out there all the way to, I don't know, 6,500 or something. If you're familiar with the big Mother Thumper cam from Comp Cams, yes, I am. I hooked our trailer to the golf cart. That's good. I have with my, what the heck is it called? My hoverboard. I have pushed stuff around the shop, engines on engine stands and the engine hoist with engines on them while I'm on the hoverboard, and steering that becomes pretty exciting. But it's actually fairly powerful. I'm very surprised. I pushed around the engine stands with big blocks on them, so it's pretty torquey. You know, those EVs. Let's see if the transmission has a shift kit. It probably would at least have that, I think, Karlov. We would, if we put a 350 together, it would at least have a shift kit in it. 14.0, 1450 on the Nova. I don't think that the Nova is going to launch very hard. Right now, it just kind of has street tires on it, but. Mexico City. What? Wait. I heard somebody that tried to hold a rocker said it was silicone. Yeah, that didn't work out very well. I say low 14s with a decent tire, not too big, with gearing, yes, 14s. 280 wheel horsepower through the automatic. 280 with the cam, yeah. Sure about the guys that built a 204 cubic inch four-cylinder that made 25 horsepower. That seems like a not very good horsepower per cubic inch range. Yeah, the Wright brothers. My great grandmother was there when they made their flights. What would it take to put an old school small block in my square body? Not very much. It should just bolt right in, right? $14 flat on a 308G body with an LQ4. I'm thinking the LQ4 extra power makes up for the extra weight. Yeah, an LQ4 makes a lot more torque than a 4.8 does. You can look at the video that I have up where I showed the stock 4.8 and 5.3 and 6.0, and a 6.0 is like hundreds of foot-pounds more than a 4.8. My 240D had about 60 horsepower. I lost a drag racer at Kenworth. Wow, even with the stick. Buddy of mine uses front-wheel drive Chevy Corsica to put a 17-foot, 140 horsepower inboard boat in and out of the water. Well, as long as it's not a slippery ramp. Yeah, the weight's at least at the right end on a front-wheel drive car. That's nice. Quarter mile in the 20s, yep. So we're at 70% saying yes, that they think that it'll run the sub 15. And Karlov, I may be overestimating what the Nova weighs. I don't know in its stripped out condition right now. It might not even weigh 3,000 pounds. It might be sub 3,000 pounds. 8.1 496 and a square body Chevy should. Those definitely have a lot of power, especially when they're unregulated, when they're not torque managed. I didn't see that the Nova has highway gearing. Yeah, it's a 308. That's why I put that in there. Not a chance it will run low 14s, high 14s. Well, and that's what it doesn't say low 14s. It says will it run a sub 15. So anything a 1490 or below is what we're looking at. Mojo, you're putting the. Yeah, if you want a cam that just sounds a lot like really cammy, then those thumper cams will do that. About ready to do some heavy towing with my 97 C2500 454 Gen 6. Those should work good. So I got in Oakland at 4 a.m. at the scrapyard dragging an old Ford truck. No axle on the bumper and the bumper half gone. Yeah, there's some there's some sketch going on out there. My A1 square regular cab, long bed, two-wheel drive, 350, 400 turbo. I would imagine a 450 fix pulls anything. Yeah, that's enough gearing for it. The 8.1 came out of a box truck, so it doesn't have any of the extra junk that was programmed into the pickup. Okay, so is the ECU different on that box truck? Let's see our poll is doing 72%. 70. Oh, just dipped down to 71% because all the no's are flooding in now. Will a 3,000-pound 4.8 Nova with a turbo 350 stock computer and 308, 408 would be good. 308 gears run a sub 15 quarter mile. 71% are saying yes, and 29% are saying no. I don't want to end that yet. I was talking about putting a small block on a square body. So you've done that many times. What I was asking you is, what would it take to put a big cam in a small block on a budget? Don't plan on racing it. Well, you need the same thing that you need with putting that cam in anything. You need enough spring to work with that cam, and you need available piston to valve clearance, all of which you have to measure to make sure that you have enough for that camshaft. And then you're going to have to tune it for idle quality, depending on how big of camshaft that you pick for that. The idle quality is going to suffer because that's part of the deal. I see all the modern mid-sized, downsized SUVs doing heavy towing. One of the things I towed with a Tahoe before, we towed our race trailer when we were going to the Long Beach Grand Prix. We borrowed a Tahoe for it, and it was awful for towing. It was nose up. It was downright frightening. I think the Nova with 308 stock stall does a 2.3 60-foot time, so it does a sub 10 8th mile and clocks in around 95 or 100 in the quarter. From first gear up to 65 miles an hour. It might do that with a 308. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I could go 65 in my Camaro. Well, we actually might be able to do it in the 4.8 liter, because the 4.8 liter is going to have a lot more RPM than I did in my Camaro, because I had a 308 gear in my Camaro. You have to do anything to the heads to put the cam in it? Yes, you do. You have to. I don't know what heads you have on it right now, but you have to make sure that you have enough valve spring in it for that camshaft. Yeah, both in spring rate and in coil bind clearance and retainer to seal clearance. If you have press-in studs and you're changing the springs, it's a good idea to have threaded studs and guide plates. And then the stock rockers are not ideal for that. Roller rockers would be better. You could make the other things work, but a lot of times when you do that, I would at least put poly locks on the stock rockers if you have rockers, because especially after you take them off once, those pinch nuts, if you've got factory ones, tend to want to back off a bunch after you do that. So you towed a 24-foot enclosed race trailer with a 67 Camaro in it behind an 03 Tacoma 2.7 liter 4-cylinder. Second gear, 60 miles an hour, 4,800 RPM. Ottawa to Vancouver, 4,600 kilometers, 2,600 miles. You did 2,600 miles in second gear? That seems like a lot. That seems like it would be really hard on the transmission. Do you believe that putting a bigger cam will not cause the CFM, the engine pulls, to increase? If the cam makes more power, it will draw more air in, if that answers your question. Oh, the mic. Yeah, I didn't select my mic, and I didn't put my note up either. Which goes to show you that if you forget one, you forget the other. Yeah, running second gear for that many miles, I would think would be really hard on the transmission. I can't imagine what the temperature would be. Overbuilt in the house. Through RZ doesn't mind 5,000 RPM for hours. And it make me cringe running that kind of RPM. The bigger the cam, the more air it pulls in. No, what I said was if the cam makes more power, the engine will draw in more air, because a motor that makes more power is going to draw in more air. It will have more airflow. Oh my gosh. I asked about the bigger cam because last week you said a bigger cam will not increase the amount of CFM the air pulls. That doesn't sound like me. It may not do that at idle. It may not do that at cruise. But whatever modification you make to the motor, if it makes more power, there's a really good chance that it's going to draw more air in. So if that's your question, you're not asking the question that you want to ask because you're trying to be clever here. So just ask the question that you want to ask, because that's not it. Can you explain the physics behind running pistons in an engine backwards? From my understanding, the wrist pins are offset, so it loosens the pistons in the bore. Not, you mean flipping the pistons so that you change the pin position? I think I'd like to tow anything over 4,000 pounds more than 20 miles with a 4-cylinder. And if it's a fuel injected motor and it's a modern one, I would actually be less worried about the motor part of it than I would be about the trans. Maybe I'm just leery of transmissions because my transmission went out. On a GMC L92 stock engine, if I did a 234, 247 cam, you mentioned in an old article, how badly are you supposed fuel economy? I don't think fuel economy is going to be that great with that camshaft. I don't know because I've never put it in a car, in a vehicle and measured like steady state cruise to see what that difference is. And you'd almost have to do that to figure out what it is. But I suspect that it's going to be worse than stock. Stretch the governor spring a little bit on the 350 turbo so that truck I changed the starter. What about high compression head, or the better choice on a bigger cam? People often combine a higher compression with wilder cam timing, because when you do that, you can get away with that with the same octane fuel. They also do that because when you go to a bigger cam, typically you lose power down low. And so they're trying to get some of that back with more compression. Is a 3,000 pound Nova on slicks or street tires? It's on street tires right now. I don't think that they're I don't think that they're. I don't think they're. Well, there's not slicks on it. I don't think. Let's answer the real question we can't find on YouTube: how to make 600 horsepower on LS1 NA. I already have that video up. And how much boost can an LS1 handle with ring gap? The LS1 specifically, like the original aluminum 5.7 LS1, we don't normally go more than 1,000 horsepower on it, but I don't know how far you can go beyond that. So because you've asked this question like 3 times in a row, you're gone. Always with the clicky noises. Yeah, Dan, we're not going down the piston flip rabbit hole again. We've talked about that many times. Yeah, there's no reason to ask a question multiple times. Certainly 2 would be, oh, maybe I clicked it twice, but 3 or 4 or whatever, that's not good. And see, it cleared the audio up, so everybody's happy now. Yes, flipped air cleaner lids we can talk about all night, Bob, because especially if you have a quadrojet, you should be flipping the air cleaner. Richard, I want to build a high RPM 4.8 with ported 706 heads. What kind of RPM do you think I could safely turn with roughly 300 CFM? I don't think 300 CFM is going to be the thing that's going to determine how much RPM you can run. Yes, flipped air cleaner lids. I'm surprised I haven't done that. I need to maybe on a Pontiac. Oh, that's what I need to show you guys the photo that that will be for tomorrow night. Make sure that you guys come here tomorrow night because I got to show you actually more of the comment, but the photo that David Freiberger sent me and then the comment that he sent will be good. That will be a good discussion for tomorrow night. So bring popcorn and bring beverages, and that'll be good. But back to my thing, I need to run another quadrojet on something. I have the Pontiac 350 that I can run. So we have quadrojet stuff. So I want to run a quadrojet on something, and I have to run on the dyno. I have to do a video with good audio of the air cleaner flip, of the lid flip, because that's the noise, right? You have to have the cool noise. Barry, did I miss I must have missed your question. What was your question? I'm scrolling back, Barry, but I don't see it. And I'm scrolling. Barry, I don't see it. But I'd like to pick your brain on the 8.1 things to do and what not to do. Well, I have a couple of videos up, but the videos are basically all I know about the 8.1. I mean, it's a 496. It makes lots of torque. It works pretty well. I'm going to be running more testing on it, small camshafts, and maybe even more extravagant things now after my conversation with a particular gentleman. So we might be doing that, and also the 8.8 version, the industrial version of that, which would be cool. But I'd like to try some ported heads, and he's got some stuff. And I have a Dart intake manifold, a carburetor intake manifold that we want to try. We already ran boost with it, which it seems to love. And there are guys on here, Mike Davis in particular, who has run boost on his truck for years. So we know that it works pretty well. How the LV3 is working. The guys from Brian Tooley, I have a video up on one. The guys from Brian Tooley have run a few of those. Can you use a quadrajet as a blow-through power adder successfully? I've never tried it. Did one of the trophy 4-cylinders come with a Q-jet? It did. The 4-barrel one. I don't know if it was probably was a Q-jet. I would think, being a Pontiac, although it could have been a little Carter or something. I'd have to look it up. I think it was a Q-jet though. Ever get a chance to mess with the Steve Morse engine? No, I don't have Steve Morse kind of knowledge or money. He does really good stuff. I'm a big fan of his stuff. 94 Z28 made about the same power as a 4.8 and would run easy 14. So I think the Nova should. Yeah, a 94, that's going to be an LT1, right? If it's an LT1, then it's going to have a lot more torque probably than a 4.8 liter. I'm not trying to be clever. Last week, I said I would like to see a test on how CFM increases as cam duration goes up. You said cam doesn't affect CFM. Okay, so now I'm understanding what I said. Cam duration doesn't affect CFM. Those two things are not directly linked. They're correlated. They're not causal. So like I said, if the cam changes power, that could change, that would change airflow. So when you look at a power curve and you see a cam swap and you see the power results of the cam swap, you're also looking at a change in airflow. Do you have a horsepower goal for the cam 4.8? No, we have a cam that we've already put in it. Actually, the ideal situation, I would think, would be to run the 4.8 stock and then put the cam in it, but it may go in with just a cam. On my 393 Windsor, build one of my rod bolts misses the block by 30. Oh, no, 3,000s? 3,000 seems like not enough. 3,500s. I would put more in it than that. Yeah, and the 94 Z28 was an LT1. So as a 350, it's going to have more torque than a 4.8, I would think. What's a good source for CNG setups? I don't know. I've never run one. Put the quadrajet on a 4.8 Nova. I don't know if are the carbureted intakes. I don't think that they're set up for a Q-jet, right? I guess we could do an adapter, but 94 LT1 is rated at 275 horsepower. Yeah, I wouldn't go by the ratings because the ratings oftentimes can be affected by what tune they put in the factory ECU. So I would go more by the way that we run them on the dyno. And I think that if I remember right, 233. No, they probably did make comparable power. Although the LT1, I think I need to compare them now that you're mentioning that. But I think they made comparable peak power. But I think that no, I take that back. The LT1 actually made more power than that. Made more power than the 4.8 did. which tune or which way the marketing team wanted it biased. Exactly. 3 or 8 gears are what's going to kill the Nova. Yeah, and that's what we want to test. We want to see how bad that is. I mean, I ran my Camaro around every day for the whole time that I ever owned it with 308 gears in it. So it ran fine. But it's not going to help it in quarter mile. There's a guy on YouTube with a 4.8 or a 5.3 or 4. He runs a Q-Jet on. He loves it. The Q-Jets work good. I mean, we've run them. Barry, what is your? Did you ask again? What's your question, Barry? Oh, on my 393 Windsor. Yeah, no, it's not. It's not enough. So I answered that, right? $750 Dominator or $750 mechanical. Well, those two things are really the same thing. .308 gears, especially with a 3-speed trans, actually work out fairly well for driving around. Barry, it shouldn't be hard to have 20 or at least 20 or 30 thousandths clearance on there. I mean, that's just a die grinder. That's nothing. I thought it'd be interesting to see how CFM carb size requirements. So, okay, that now we're getting to what we're talking about. Goes up with everything when everything else stays the same. So if the camshaft changes, you think that the carburation is going to change. So really, you should stop thinking about that and start and think about it the way that we're telling you. As airflow demand of the motor changes, your carb size requirement will change. As your motor makes more power, it's going to need a bigger carburetor. Camshaft is one of the things that can do that. Also displacement, static compression, head flow, intake manifold, all of those things that help it make power can also make it want more carburation. The 305 would need the steam passages drilled. What 305? You ever put 305 heads on a 400? No, I have not. That seems like an odd combination. What would quarter mile time expected using Brodex heads on a blueprint engine, 750 carburetor, 2500 stall? We don't know anything else about your Jamie. We don't know anything else about the engine. I don't know what the cam timing is. I don't know what the compression is. Do I know what I don't know which Brodex heads are on there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to think about there. Richard, when you grind rings, to add gap, do you use a hand or electric setup? Yes, I've done it both ways. I've done it with. We have Westech has a total seal ring grinder with a dial indicator on it. I use that a lot because it makes life a lot. It's just a lot quicker, the actual grinding part of it. I have also done it by hand by putting a flat file in the vise and then running the, running the ring on that. I've also done it with a whizzy wheel, a cutoff wheel, and spun that and grabbed it with a ring, as it were. I don't recommend that because it's really easy to go from 15 to 41 with a whizzy wheel. It takes off a lot. So you got to be really pretty good about it. But I've done it a lot of different ways, and they all work. It just, some of them take more time than others. A torque converter that flashes up to 4,000. Yeah, we've talked about that. I mean, of course, converter will definitely help and gearing will help. We know both of those. But the question is, with the stuff that it has right now, what will it do? Let's see. GM uses Rochester 4GCs. Yeah, it might have been a 4GC on the trophy. I haven't looked that much to see. Do titanium valves I'm assuming that the question is, can titanium valves use lighter springs? Yes, they can, but It's not just spring rate, though. It's more than that. It's spring frequency. Talking about putting 305s in a 400 small block. It's a small chamber head, so it's going to help, I guess, that you're trying to help with compression or something. They don't flow very well, but a stock set of 305, like 305 Vortec heads, may flow better than the stock 400 heads do. Yeah, it's a 4GC, has 4 jet casts in the side of the body. I don't have the intake manifold for the Trophy 4-cylinder. That's a 4-barrel intake manifold anyway, and I also don't have the carburetor for it, so I don't have either one of those. Barry, if it's 35 thousandths, or as you have there, 350 thousandths would be a lot. That's 3/10 of an inch, more 3.5 tenths of an inch. If it's 35 thousandths, that's probably enough. If it's 3 thousandths, that's not enough. If it's 350 thousandths, that's way more than enough. First time I gap rings, I use a cutoff wheel. Somehow I did not mess anybody up. I've done it successfully a number of times like that, and it does work. It's just, I like to throw the caveat out there for people that may have never done rings before and never done it that way before, that it can get out of hand. L69 heads will take on all comers. Yeah, I want to run. Oliver has that L69, and I really want to run that thing. Grind the pan rails. It's only 35 thousandths, or yeah, 35 thousandths. Pan rail is easy to grind. That's anything that's in the way, especially if the motor's not assembled yet. Just grind this stuff out of the way. So where are we at on our poll? 68% saying that they think it will run a sub 15. 32% saying no, it will not. With the 8.1 video, could you do a comparison of stock intake and intake mod and different cams? I'm not looking to go crazy with this build, just simple mods. I have a stock intake manifold, and I have a modified stock intake manifold, and I also have the Dart intake manifold. And we will run also some kind of little, and probably a couple of different camshafts on it. It was the 305 heads on a 1980 Corvette. Was that a California only Corvette that had the 305? I love the animation while grinding the rings. Well, that's what happens. That's what you do, you know? Wow, wow, wow. So reloading, you want to see if it's good enough to go from a 600 to 650 or 750. The interesting thing about that is that we can put all those carburetors on the same motor without changing the camshaft, and they will all work. And even the smaller carburetor on the cammed motor will also work. So the necessity of one of those things requiring the other thing actually is not going to happen for you. Like I said, it's possible to run each combination with each smaller thing and each combination with each bigger thing, and they will all work. So I don't think we're not going to see like we go from a stock cam to a 220 cam. Oh, that needs this. We need to go away from the 650 and now put the 750 on there. It'd be an interesting test to see what the change is, like do a 650 and a 750 with a stock cam, and then do a 650 and a 750 with a bigger cam, and see if the gain gets bigger, which is what I would expect to happen. Because whenever we do a test with something, for instance, if we have, a real good example of that is the camshaft test that I did, the one where we made 175 horsepower with a cam swap. Well, we did that because we skewed the test, as it were, by making everything else need that bigger cam. Because it was a 408-inch motor with plenty of compression, lots of head flow, a good intake manifold. It basically had everything it needed. And then we put a stock camshaft in it, which was, was awful. I mean, it made decent torque, not torque like it did with the better cam, but it did okay because it will work a little bit better, or it will work okay down low because there's enough cam timing down low. It's still bad. But then we put the right camshaft in it, then we look like heroes. We go, oh, look, we made 175 horsepower. And you do the same thing with a carburetor. Is it like we do if we put a 1-barrel carburetor on a cup motor and then put the 950 or whatever an earlier carbureted cup motor would have run on, if we put that on there, then again, you look like a hero. So you can make that test do that, but one thing requiring the other is going to be a little bit of a stretch. Spring frequency is a new term. Is that is that important for titanium valves? It's important for every valve, because a lot of people, Maurice, people try to cure valve float and other valve train related problems with more spring pressure, and that's not the answer. The answer is to have the cam and the spring, not just the spring rate, the frequency that the spring oscillates at, have those work together. That's how people get these motors to run really high RPM, is those have to work together. It's not just like, oh, well, it's not revving high enough, so we need 100 more pounds of spring pressure. Actually, 100 more pounds of spring pressure can actually make it rev less, because it makes things hit. Now it's super aggravated. So that it doesn't always work like that. So that it has to be the right combination of stuff. That's what we're saying. I bought a hand crank grinder. That's the other one, Barry. I've done the wheel one too, where you actually spin it. What we do, and I think West-Tech has one of those also that I've used. So we take that, we clamp that in the vise, and then you can spin the wheel, and then you put it's basically the the analog manual version of the electronic thing with the fancy doohickey and dial indicator that the Total Seal one that we use. This is just the manual version of it, and I've done that many times. Yes, harmonics. Sears road handlers, are those H-rated or something? Adding valve spring pressure adds traction control to your car. Fly-in, clarifying 750 4500 or 750 4150. 4500, will the 4500 make more power? I would have to flow both of those to see what the potential is. I don't know. I don't remember flowing those. When I ran my Engine Masters motor, I ran a 750 Dominator carburetor. My guess is if you ran both of those on the same intake manifold, and the intake manifold was a 4500 manifold, and you ran like a Dominator or an HP or an XP carburetor 4150 on a Dominator, because I've done this before, on a Dominator intake manifold, and then put a Dominator on the Dominator intake manifold, the Dominator usually makes more power. I think because the ports, basically the openings, the airflow openings are positioned better on the Dominator carburetor. So if I had to, without testing it, if I had to bet and guess on that, I would say that the 750 Dominator tested on a Dominator intake manifold is going to make more power than the 4150 does. I've got a 95 454 TBI Gen 5. I'd like to get rid of the unreliable fuel injection and possibly swap to a carburetor. If it's a stock motor, that thing doesn't need anything bigger than a 650. But most guys will not put a 650 on a 454, even one that only makes 320 or 30 horsepower, because that's all it's going to make if it's all stock. You could put a 750 on there, and a RPM air gap or something would work good. I'm scrolling. Well, the Nova runs 15s. Maybe. It's theoretically possible. We don't know that. I just meant under those conditions. I don't really have a feel for that. I'm actually thinking that I would kind of be disappointed if it went 1490s. I'm thinking it's going to be closer to 1390s, even with bad tires. That's just me. Road handlers. I had radial TAs and then Kelly superchargers back in the day. Getaway performance. No, the 4.8s, if you put an R and an E in front of that, and you were very, very liberal about your definition of rebuilt, then yes, kind of. If you take a look at the video that I have up, you can see what we did with it. It was a motor that didn't run that I got from the wrecking yard, and we just made it run, but it's all stock. Now it has a camshaft in it. It has a Brian Tooley Racing Truck Norris low lift camshaft in it. 2004 Tahoe 4.8 liter LR4, the best one. Sat for 5 years. Shows PO 300 now. Had PO 307. PO 300 flashes when hitting gas while driving. Any clue where to start? Does anybody know what codes those are? I'd have to look them up to see. I don't know them off the top of my head. Could you use whatever size carburetor on engine and see how much CFM the engine pulls with said cam, then increase the duration and see how much CFM the engine pulls? I guess you could, yeah. You would then know you don't need to increase the carb size for that engine. Mm-hmm. The airflow through the carburetor is not really going to tell you that, unfortunately. Like I said, if we run a 650 on it, it will still run. If you run a 750 on it, it will still run. Run a 454 my 80 dually, a stock one, use a 750 carb, have 456 gears, 456 gears, it runs great. It should. That's it. The 750 carburetor is kind of the go-to carburetor for all of those applications. Anything that's, I think guys put them on 300 horsepower motors, which I don't think that they should, all the way up to 500 horsepower motors, and maybe even beyond that. P0307 is a 7-cylinder misfiring. P0300 is random multiple cylinders. See, somebody had the answer. Who wants to change their firing order? No, we'll definitely run under 15s, 1430s would be my guess. Bad injector or intake manifold leak, no change with the coils and plugs. You'd have to take the injectors out to flow them to see if the injector is a problem. A leak should be pretty easy to detect unless it's random. You can check plugs. In fact, you can just pull the plug and bring the gap down on all of them and see if that helps with the misfire. I ran a Summit 600 Carbo by 95 LT1. Would I get a difference on a 750? Probably not if the motor is stock. I had a 650 carb on it, and it would run out of fuel on the 454. How would it run out of fuel? Did you have a fuel supply issue, like you didn't have enough fuel pump to it or something? Because the reality is that compared to a 750, a 650 on a 454 will supply more fuel with the same jetting, because the signal is going to be much greater on a smaller carburetor. So it will give you more fuel and not less fuel. Put a lawnmower carb on it. That's the answer. Honda D16 Y7 with all forged internals and a stage 3 blocks cam. Head mods for GT45 turbo. Got to rephrase your question. It has a word in there that I do not like. Mr. Junkyard, ever raced or driven a Lemons car? Yes, I've raced in the 24 hours of Lemons up in, not Button Willow, Thunder Hill, I think, is where I ran the Lemons car. Replace the wires, then GKs. Mechanical GM fuel pump. The normal problem, I've replaced 10,000. You've replaced 10,000 of them? It seems like a lot of pumps. I guess what I need to do now, since we were talking about carburetors and camshafts and stuff, is I need to run a big block. I almost have to do this. I can do it on the 8.1. So I can run a big block, and the 8.1 actually makes fairly decent power. So I can run a bunch of carburetors on that and see what it does. So we can run I can run a 500 CFM 2-barrel. And then we can run a 650 and a 750 and an 850 and a 950 and see what they all do. And then we can put a camshaft in it and then run carburetors again, I guess, and see. And then I guess if I'm running the carburetors, I need to now run an air hat on them so that we can figure out airflow, I guess. Let's see. Richard, years back, I put a 390 carb on my 390 FE. Ran great, had good throttle response. I ran a 450 Economaster for quite a while on my Camaro back in the day, but it was pretty stock, and it worked really well. $16 carbs on a big block. Just discovered the live stream. Evan, welcome. Regarding trailer, I believe the auto manufacturers are at fault for inflated tow ratings. An F-150 should not be able to tow 13,000 pounds. There was a Holley 490 4-barrel. I don't remember the 490. I eventually switched out the 450 Economaster to a 600. I want to say it was a 600 vacuum secondary, probably like one of the Summit special ones back then. You should always record airflow. We can't always do that, but we can. It's easier on a carbureted motor. I thought that the 650 was running out of fuel. I don't know what you mean running out of fuel. Did it drain the bowls or something? If it drained the bowls, then that's a fuel pump problem and not a 650 problem. Don't forget the 800 Q-Jet on the 8.1. I'd have to look and see if I didn't even look at the Dart manifold to see if the dual plane manifold, if it has provisions for a quadrajet. If it does, then it should have a quadrajet on there. I'm going to pull a Gen 6 454 and 4L80 from a junkyard. 4L80 is for my 5.3 liter, and the 454 will get shoehorned into an 80 C3. I like it, a big block Corvette. That'll be perfect. So somebody, yeah, running out of air might be a different one, but it's not going to be running out of air either, not on a stock 454. Because I've run the 650 on lots of Gen 6 motors. I've run the 650 carburetor on lots of Gen 6 with cams in them, and those are making like 425 horsepower. You know, 4.25, like a 4.25, 427 that you'd have a 850 or something on. So somebody tell our Honda guy about the word thoughts. Fuel leak. Could have a fuel leak. Yeah, it's hard to tell from behind the wheel what's happening. A lot of people can't determine whether something is rich or lean just from the feel of stuff, because a lot of times it can be the same. Some people can't tell if it has too much timing or too little timing. It's a lot easier to data log that stuff and have the actual information rather than, you know, trying to guess. Richard, let's see, not. Speedway to a standalone ECU. I don't think I've ever run one of those. I don't know how much different that is than that. We have the MS3 Pro. Is it a lot different than that? So we'll go ahead and close out our poll with 71% saying yes and 29% saying no on the 4.8 liter Nova. I kind of I'm really interested to see, because I like starting out with things that are wrong, and that combination, particularly if it's carbureted, would be wrong. If it's fuel injected, we're going to be able to make a lot better show of it, I think. But if it's carbureted, like a lot of guys would have on the street, with a turbo 350 and a stock converter, which might be like an 1800 or 1900 stall converter, it might be less than that on a 4.8, and then with a 308 gear, it'd be lethargic at best. So we'll end our thing there. Two more minutes. Got a lot of stuff to do. It's late. It's like almost 9 o'clock. I love using a vacuum gauge to dial the carb. The vacuum gauge is good for carburetor, especially doing. It can help with idle speed and stuff. That's always good. A lot of guys can use a vacuum gauge to dial it in reasonably well for air fuel also, although I really like using an air fuel gauge. But the thing is, a lot of times we're using an air fuel gauge, and if you decide that you want the carburetor to be providing a particular air fuel ratio, the motor might not like that. And then that's when you start listening. And that's when the vacuum gauge helps. And also we look at idle speed. So okay, look, I added fuel. It doesn't want to be at 14.7. It wants to be at 12.7 or 13.1 or whatever the number is. Whatever that number is, it's happiest right there. That's where it has the most RPM. It sounds better. It likes it right there. It wants to be there, and it will tell you that as long as you listen. When changing valve springs on a 4.8 and you turn the motor over to release tension on the other springs, would you have to turn the motor over again to reinstall them so the same springs have tension? With the motor in almost any position with the valves in different spots, and there are lots of rockers that you can undo. So undo all the rockers that you can that don't have tension on them. Then move the motor and release the tension on the others. Sometimes you have to move it more than once and release it on the others, and then take them off so that they don't have tension on them. Quite honestly, A lot of times, especially with stock springs, we don't do that. We just undo all of them and take it off. When you put them back on, seems to be more problematic putting them on. So you put on all the ones that don't have tension on them. So you could bolt all those down. So you have a half turn or a quarter turn, half turn, 3/4 of a turn, turn and a half, whatever of preload. That's not very much. If you have ones where it wants to open the valve, then you just rotate the motor until it doesn't want to do that, till it's back on the heel of the cam. And reloading, the thing that you're also going to see is that a 600 CFM carb flows more than 600 CFM and will flow more and can flow more than that on the motor. So we might get a reading that's above 600 CFM, and the 600 CFM carburetor might still be right for it. We might put a 750 on it and it might be more than that, or it might be less than that. And that's not the only thing that's going to determine what carburetor you want on the motor. So I would use whatever like if you see a number, if you see an airflow number from the air hat, that's only going to give you an idea. It's not going to give you an absolute. So for a carb test, it'd be awesome to see what an equivalent powered small block. So you would just want to see a small block and a big block. What you want to see is a power level, that the same power level that happens at a different engine speed. Basically, this is what a small block and a big block test would be. They could be done with anything, but yeah, it would be interesting to see. I don't know what the airflow number. I tend to think that the one that happens at a higher engine speed, I think that the airflow will be greater, but it might not be. Arc, yes, unless the stock big block is an L88 and not a peanut port headed Gen 5 tiny camshaft, low compression, big block. Makes a little bit less than an L88 or an L89. If you ever played with an 81 Turbo TA, I have not. That would be kind of cool to do. .305 Vortec versus a 4.8 liter. I don't think that will be much of a, from a stock standpoint, it's not even going to be close. So Austin, you're not a fan of the guys that cobble together the trailer lighting? So for the guys that are, this will be the last comment for tonight. I got to get going. But for the guys asking about the 305 versus the 4.8 liter, this will give you an idea. A stock 305 tune port motor makes like 260 on the engine dyno, the way that we run it with headers and no accessories and all that, with an optimum tune, all of that stuff, makes like 260. A stock 4.8 liter makes like 325 or 330, just stock with headers on it. So that tells you where they're already starting off. One is quite a bit more than the other. And on that note, it's time to get going. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'm happy to be back. I'll be back tomorrow morning and then tomorrow night with more videos up all of it. So from now on, it's like until I go to the SEMA show, I guess it's just like nonstop getting stuff done, jump right back into make it happen mode. Thank you guys all for showing up. Whoever was asking the question about the Honda, the thing is, you don't want to use the word thoughts in any of your questions because I don't answer questions with the word thoughts in them. Just so you know, if you're new here, that's one of the rules. Don't ask. It's just a weird thing for me. But thank you guys all for showing up. And I will be back tomorrow morning to inspire everybody because I have a project that I brought back with me from West Tech. It is a L98, L78, 396, 375 horse big block that I need to put together. Right now, I'm focused more on the short block. I want to get the short block painted and together because I don't have the camshaft yet for it, but I'd like to get the camshaft and get that in. I have the cylinder heads. The cylinder heads are all done. I need to paint them. So maybe we'll have a poll and ask whether or not I should put Gliptol in the insides. I'm painting the outside all orange because it's a big block Chevy. It should be orange. And so that's what I'm going to do. That's my goal for tomorrow. But right now, my goal for tomorrow, before maybe before, maybe after I do the morning, let's get our project done kind of thing, is to get it out of the truck and put it on the engine stand and just get it in my garage because it's been in the back of my truck for a long time. So I need to get it out of there. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.